Part 2, Secrets in the Shadows, 1500 to 2000 words. Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The diary's pages had drawn him in, its cryptic entries haunting him long after he had closed it. The first night in the lighthouse had been unsettling. An eerie quiet had enveloped the place, the kind of stillness that made his skin crawl. The wind howled against the stone, and the waves crashed violently against the cliffs below. But there was more than just the weather that kept him awake. He lay in the narrow bed in the keeper's quarters, staring at the ceiling, the journal resting on the small table beside him. The words on the pages seemed to linger in the air, as though they had a life of their own. "I fear I am not alone in this place." The words echoed in his mind. He had to know more. The diary spoke of strange occurrences, disappearances, whispers in the wind, and a growing sense of dread among the keepers. But it wasn't until the morning that the first clue surfaced. When Ethan awoke, he found an old newspaper clipping tucked between the pages of the diary. It was yellowed with age, the edges frayed, but the headline was still legible: Mysterious Disappearance of Lighthouse Keeper. The article detailed the sudden disappearance of the lighthouse keeper, the very man who had written the diary. The article mentioned that the keeper had vanished without a trace one stormy night, and despite extensive searches by the local authorities, no evidence had been found. The case remained unsolved, and the lighthouse had been left abandoned for years, untouched by any future keepers. The date of the article was several decades old, and yet the mystery surrounding the keeper's disappearance seemed to have never been solved. Ethan's mind raced. Why hadn't anyone mentioned this to him when he arrived? Why had Hawthorne, the estate agent, kept the true history of the lighthouse hidden? His instincts told him there was more to this story, and it wasn't just about an old lighthouse and a missing keeper. It was something deeper, something that had been buried in the shadows for far too long. Ethan decided to investigate further. He packed a small bag with essentials, his camera, and a flashlight. He had to uncover the truth, even if it meant going deeper into the town's secrets. As he ventured into Barnes' Table that afternoon, the weather seemed to turn in an instant. The sky grew darker, and a thick fog began to roll in from the sea. The narrow streets were nearly deserted, and the few townsfolk he encountered were quick to avert their gaze. He couldn't help but feel that the entire town was avoiding him, as though they were hiding something. The silence was oppressive, thick with unspoken words. He approached the local tavern, a weather-beaten building tucked in a corner of the town square. Inside, the air was heavy with the smell of stale beer and cigarette smoke. A few patrons sat at the bar, their conversations hushed, eyes darting toward Ethan when he entered. The bartender, an older man with a grizzled beard, eyed him suspiciously. Ethan approached the counter and ordered a drink, hoping to glean some information from the locals. "What brings you to Barnes' Table?" the bartender asked, his voice rough, his eyes narrowing as if he had already guessed the answer. "I inherited the lighthouse," Ethan replied casually, trying to keep his tone neutral. "I'm just getting familiar with the area." The bartender stiffened, his hands freezing over the glass he was cleaning. He didn't look at Ethan immediately, but when he did, there was something in his eyes, a flicker of recognition, or maybe fear. "You shouldn't be messing with that place," the bartender muttered under his breath. "Some things are better left forgotten." Ethan leaned forward, his curiosity piqued. "What do you mean?" The bartender hesitated, his eyes darting to the other patrons, who were now listening in. "It's not just the missing keeper," he said, his voice barely audible. "There's a reason why that place was abandoned. People have gone missing over the years. Some say the lighthouse is cursed. Others say it's the sea, or something in the water. But nobody wants to talk about it. Not anymore." Ethan's heart quickened. "Who can I talk to about the lighthouse?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. The bartender glanced around nervously. "You need to talk to someone who's been here longer than me. Old man Hardy, maybe. He's lived here his whole life. You'll find him down by the docks, but don't expect him to share anything easily." With that, the bartender turned away, his attention already shifting to another customer. Ethan knew he had to speak to this Hardy. If anyone had answers, it was likely him. The fog had thickened by the time Ethan made his way down to the docks. The air was cold, damp, and carried a salty tang from the sea. He spotted an older man sitting on a bench, staring out at the water. His face was weathered, his clothes tattered from years of exposure to the elements. Ethan approached cautiously, unsure of how to initiate the conversation. The man's eyes flickered as he noticed Ethan's presence, but he didn't immediately acknowledge him. "Are you Hardy?" Ethan asked, his voice steady. The man turned slowly, studying Ethan with a gaze that seemed to pierce through him. "You're the one who inherited the lighthouse, aren't you?" he asked, his voice gravelly, as though it hadn't been used in years. Ethan nodded. "I'm trying to learn more about it. There's a lot I don't understand. What can you tell me about the lighthouse keeper who went missing?" Hardy's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, he seemed lost in thought. "Ah, so you found the diary, I take it," he muttered. "It's been a long time since anyone's asked about that place. The keeper, he was a good man, but the sea has a way of taking things, and it doesn't give them back." Ethan leaned in, his heart racing. What happened to him? Why did he disappear? Hardy hesitated, glancing nervously at the surrounding docks. "It wasn't just the keeper," he said quietly. "There were others. People who came to the lighthouse and vanished. Some say it's the sea's curse. But the truth? The truth is darker than that." Ethan's pulse quickened as he leaned closer. "What truth?" Hardy's gaze shifted again, and he seemed to shrink in on himself. "You're better off leaving well enough alone, boy," he whispered. "The lighthouse doesn't want to be found." Before Ethan could press further, Hardy stood and walked away, disappearing into the fog, leaving Ethan alone with his thoughts. The weight of the old man's words lingered in the air, pressing down on him. The lighthouse doesn't want to be found. Ethan stood there, his mind racing. Whatever was happening at the lighthouse, it was far more dangerous than he had initially thought. He had to go back. He had to uncover the truth, no matter the cost.